Welcome once again. The latest Global Peace Index (GPI) report has once again ranked South Africa as one of the world's most violent and dangerous countries. The Institution of Economics and Peace (IEP) released its 2023 report, which revealed that South Africa is less peaceful than a year ago. It was ranked 130 out of 163 peaceful countries and dropping 8 places in the rankings.
On the Safety and Security Index, which looks specifically at criminality, political instability, violence, and unrest, South Africa ranks in the bottom 20. Now, this morning, we are also looking at the fact that the country is placed 144th out of 163, just ahead of Ukraine, which is at war with Russia. The report shows that deteriorations outweighed improvements as post-COVID increases in civil unrest and political instability persists, while regional and global conflicts intensify. Joining us now from Johannesburg to discuss this further is a criminologist, Mathoko Nolotubani. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. South Africa has, unfortunately, according to this report, slipped to number 130 out of 163, which is much lower than where it was previously ranked. So I'd like you to maybe talk to us about the importance of this ranking and what are the factors that may have contributed to this slip?
So just jumping right straight into the factors, in the context of this report or of the ranking, the two factors that stand out as the worst in South Africa are the levels of the violent crime and homicidal murder. So violence in South Africa is facilitated primarily by easy access to weapons, general climate of lawlessness, corruption in general, and specifically within the criminal justice system, and the high level of violent protests that the country has been experiencing for a couple of years now.
Okay, I mean, those are, combination of things. Would you say that all of these are, results of the failure of the South African government over time? Is there some level of, anger? Is there some level of maybe even failure of the systems in South Africa that have led to its continuing to deteriorate with regard to security?
Yeah, no, definitely. So a lot of people are feeling frustrated, and especially I think I did mention the issue of the high level of violent protests in our country that have emerged over the years. That is due to feelings of frustration and anger, which have heightened by years of waiting for promises to be fulfilled. As much as South Africa has had political freedom for a couple of years now, we still have issues with, socio-economic freedom, where a lot of people are still living under very, very poor circumstances. A lot of people are poverty-stricken and all of that. And service delivery in a lot of places in South Africa, especially the most vulnerable communities in South Africa, is very poor. So anger definitely, and feelings of frustration, and that is predominantly the reason why you see a lot of violent protests in South Africa.
Let's talk about the failings of the government. I'd like to piggyback on the last question that my colleague has asked you. Now, we've seen several institutions in the South African government that in some way may have failed the people. Now, this is not just talking about the law enforcement agents, even the government itself. The conversation about the Phala farm gates has been one that has been ongoing for the longest time, and very recently we saw that there was a judgment as to the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa had been cleared of these charges. However, new findings and a new conversation has sparked as to someone jumping to his defense, stating that he had no idea that money was being kept in the farm. How would you say that, and of course, the people of South Africa, from the reactions we're seeing on social media, are very displeased by this, saying that the president had earlier on actually admitted to having other businesses. How would you say that the government, what role does the government play in contributing to this distrust, to this failing of the people of South Africa? The government, the ANC government in particular, which is of course in power, and then the law enforcement agents.
Yeah, the biggest problem, as I said also in the beginning, is that corruption in general is an issue in South Africa. So it's as much as the ANC government has been ruling the country for a couple of years now. We've seen an issue of greed where people are all about amassing the wealth for themselves and not for the people. So then that's where the frustration also emanates, where we find that people are just looking after their own interest and not necessarily the interest of the people of South Africa. So corruption is very big in South Africa. We have a big problem with corruption in the government, within the government itself, and then within the criminal justice system, which is very worrying because you find police officers, for example, colluding with perpetrators or offenders. So yeah, that's in short, that's one of the issues that we are experiencing in South Africa, where people are greedy and looking after their own interests, and also where we see a lot of corruption in different governmental departments or the criminal justice system.
Is it in any way comforting, that, some of the reasons behind South Africa's security status are very different, from, other countries? For example, Nigeria is ranked 144 on that list, and there's also other countries. You can see Niger also at the 138. Somalia is down there at 156. Sudan is at 155, and I'm just mentioning African countries. South Sudan is at 160. But something that is familiar with some of all these regions, and I'm going to look out for where Kenya is and some of the East African countries. Some of these regions, are at war. Some of these regions also have, fighting terrorism. In the east of the continent, there's the Al-Shabaab that has continues to be a problem. Ethiopia has had its challenges. The M23 rebels have been, a problem in the parts of the eastern part of the continent also. In Nigeria, of course, we've been dealing with Boko Haram and ISWAP and the like. So is it, in any way comforting, seeing that, yes, South Africa may be ranked 130, but at least its problems are internal. Its problems are really just, mostly riots and protests and disgruntled citizens, but not terrorism.
Yeah, I'm actually on the fence about that. Yes, you could say that we are better off, that we're not experiencing wars in South Africa and all of that. But I feel like South Africa is just a country at war with itself, which is very painful to say that. I mean, a country with such a beautiful constitution, our constitution is coveted not only in Africa, but globally. We've got such a beautiful constitution and amazing legislation, but we are still struggling to fight the violence in South Africa, or to solve our problems with violence is concerned in South Africa. So it is, yes, somewhat comforting, but at the same time, it's worrying that until when are we going to be at war with ourselves as a country? So that is my biggest worry as a criminologist, that we are a country that is at war with itself. We might not be experiencing war externally or civil war, but also if you look at the high level of protests that have been increasing over the years, it's extremely worrying.
Do these protests in any way have any form of impact? Have they been in any way helpful to drive the message that maybe the protesters are trying to gain, the message they are trying to pass across further?
Yes, I think, like I said earlier on, people are just feeling frustrated. And I mean, we know that where people don't believe their appeals to authorities will be heard, or where protesters are feeling that if we are going to be peaceful, nobody is going to hear us, then they resort to adopting violent methods of protest. And also, if you remember, South Africa has a violent history coming from apartheid. During the times of apartheid, the white government ruled Black people through violence. So that is where also it's coming from, and that's how the violence is actually continued. So I think protesters are trying to send a message to the government that if you are not going to listen to us when we are trying to be peaceful, then we are going to adopt more violent methods to get you to listen to us.
All right. I also want you to speak with regards what improvements you believe the South African government needs to make with regards homeland security, and all of that, both the federal and state on federal and state level. What improvements do you think are necessary at this time? And what actions would you ask that the South African government starts to take if we want to look at a safer South Africa? Because generally, we're not just talking about the protesting and disgruntled citizens. We're also talking about South Africa, which has a high level of violence against women, and these are
Yes.
things that also basically are part of the things that we look at here.
Yes, definitely. Yes, I'm so glad that you also mentioned the issue of the high level of violence against women. That's one of the biggest issues in South Africa, and especially when we refer to issues of like, the murder rate, you will see that a lot of women are dying at the hands of their perpetrators, whom in most cases are also their lovers or people that they are in relationships with. Sorry, just to backtrack, our Minister of Police just released some statistics, and it was shocking to actually see that the murder rate between January and March 2023 is over 6,000 cases. Over 6,000. I think it's about 6,200 cases were reported to the police just in 3 months. But with issues of what South Africa needs to do is that I did speak about the issues of easy access to weapons. That's one of the issues where violent crimes are concerned, that weapons are easily accessible in South Africa. But we also have an issue of the lack of resources where the criminal justice is concerned, or the police, where you'd find that issues of crimes would be reported, and then there aren't police vehicles to respond to people who are reporting or to the victims. And so if you look at it, you'd actually think that the criminals are actually more resourced or well-resourced in comparison to our police officials. I spoke about issues of corruption. We seriously need to eradicate the issue of corruption within our South African police services and the criminal justice system in general in our government. And another thing, the issues of inequality. If you also look, South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. We are so, like the issues of inequality, there's issues of unemployment and poverty that needs to be dealt with in South Africa in order for us to see a safer South Africa.
All right. Quickly, just before you go, can you quickly react to the now viral video of the Deputy President's security detail violently attacking road users? Quickly share your thoughts on that.
I'm not sure if I don't really have anything to say to that specific video. I would like to actually reserve my comments, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, that's fine. That's very fine.
All right.
We, of course, will discuss this further later on the show this morning. But thanks very much for stopping by. We really did enjoy speaking with you. And, of course, we hope that security continues to improve in South Africa and, of course, in different parts of the continent. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.